For the first time in almost 8 years, I woke up without checking my phone. No overnight client emails. No emergency Slack messages. No late-night revisions waiting for approval. No red notification bubbles reminding me that someone inside the company had made another mistake I would have to quietly fix before sunrise. Just silence. Real silence. I lay still in bed for several seconds, staring at the soft morning light spilling across the ceiling of my apartment, trying to remember what normal people felt like on a Monday morning. I had forgotten. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 36 years old, and until recently, I was Director of Client Operations at Northridge Strategic Solutions, a fast-growing consulting company in downtown Chicago. Or more accurately, I was the person secretly holding the entire company together. Officially, my job title sounded impressive. In reality, it meant I solved problems nobody else wanted to touch. Client escalations, broken internal systems, missed deadlines, contract disputes, team conflicts, reporting failures. Every fire somehow ended up on my desk. Over time, I stopped questioning it. When people learn you're reliable, they stop seeing reliability as effort. They start treating it like infrastructure, like electricity, always expected, never appreciated. I had spent 7 years becoming invisible through competence, and somehow that became normal. That morning I stood in my kitchen slowly pouring coffee, enjoying the strange unfamiliar sensation of not being urgently needed by anyone. 2 days earlier, after nearly a year of postponing it, I had finally taken 3 weeks of approved leave. Not because I wanted luxury, not because I needed travel photos, because my body had started sending warnings I couldn't ignore anymore. Migraines twice a week, constant insomnia, random chest tightness during meetings. My doctor called it chronic stress. My therapist called it prolonged workplace exhaustion. I called it Tuesday. The company approved the leave reluctantly. Actually, one person objected. Ethan Reynolds, Chief Operations Officer. My direct superior. 44 years old. Expensive watch. Perfectly rehearsed confidence. The kind of executive who believed leadership meant reminding employees how replaceable they were. Ethan had one philosophy: pressure creates performance. I hated that sentence. Mostly because people like him never experience the pressure they create. 3 days before my leave began, he had called me into his office. I remember every word. He sat behind the giant glass desk overlooking the city skyline, fingers folded carefully, always composed, always performing authority. You picked a difficult time to disappear. Disappear. Interesting word. Not vacation. Not leave. Disappear. I sat across from him calmly. My leave request was submitted 4 months ago. His expression didn't change. Quarterly contract renewals start next week. I know. You understand how many active accounts depend on your department. Of course I understood. I personally built half those systems. I prepared transition documents. He leaned forward slightly. Lauren. There was something sharp beneath his voice now. Something irritated. High performers understand timing. Translation. Dedicated employees sacrifice personal health for company convenience. I had heard variations of that sentence for years. This time I didn't react. Maybe exhaustion had finally burned away the part of me that still cared about pleasing people. I'll be unavailable for 3 weeks. That sentence visibly annoyed him. His jaw tightened. But HR had already approved everything. He couldn't stop me. So instead he smiled. Coldly. Enjoy your time off. I left knowing he meant the opposite. That was Friday. Monday morning, standing in my apartment finally disconnected from work, I almost felt guilty. It took me years to understand how dangerous workplace conditioning becomes. You start believing rest is selfish. You start apologizing for basic human limits. You begin measuring self-worth through productivity. And eventually you forget how to exist outside performance. At 9:42 a.m. my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Ethan Reynolds. Of course. I stared at it for nearly 5 seconds, then answered. Not because I wanted to, because 7 years of professional survival had programmed automatic obedience. I didn't even say hello. His voice hit immediately. Aggressive. Fast. Already angry. Where exactly are you? I frowned. At home. Why? I thought I misheard him. What? His voice sharpened instantly. We have a major reporting failure. Silence. I waited. He continued. The Prescott account hasn't received compliance documents. I blinked slowly. Prescott Manufacturing was one of our largest corporate clients. $40 million annual contract value. But compliance reporting wasn't due until Wednesday. I personally structured that timeline. It's Monday, I said carefully. Yes. The deadline is Wednesday. There was a pause. Then suddenly, you should have handled this before leaving. I stood motionless in my kitchen, coffee cooling in my hand. Something strange happened inside me. Not anger. Recognition. For years every operational dependency had quietly attached itself to me. Nobody learned systems because I knew them. Nobody prepared backup structures because I solved everything faster alone. The company had become dependent on my competence. And somehow management believed dependency was weakness. Ethan's voice returned. You need to log in immediately. I stared out the apartment window. Downtown traffic moved quietly beneath the morning rain. Something inside me finally shifted. No panic. No urgency. Just clarity. No. Silence. Long silence. I had never said no to him before. Not once. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was almost unrecognizable. Cold. Careful. Dangerous. What did you say? I set the coffee mug down slowly. I'm on approved leave. You work for this company. No. I interrupted quietly. I work with this company. Another silence. Then he exploded. Do you understand how much revenue depends on you? That sentence stayed with me. Not concern for the team. Not concern for clients. Not concern for operational stability. Revenue. Always revenue. I answered calmly. If everything collapses because one employee takes vacation. I paused deliberately. You built the wrong company. His breathing became audible. Fast now. Angry. Then finally he said it. The sentence I never expected. You know what, Lauren? Pause. If you're unavailable during critical operations. Long pause. We don't need you here. I felt my pulse steady. Strangely steady. No fear. No panic. After years of tolerating disrespect, something about hearing it directly made everything simpler. He continued. Effective immediately. Consider your employment terminated. There it was. 7 years reduced to one sentence. I stood quietly. The strange thing was, I didn't feel devastated. I felt relieved. I almost smiled. Ethan waited, probably expecting tears. Pleading. Negotiation. Instead I asked one question. Who's handling Prescott? Silence. Then irritated frustration. We reassigned Samantha. I nearly laughed. Samantha had joined operations 4 months earlier. Smart girl. Hard-working. But nowhere near ready for enterprise contract management. That wasn't criticism. That was reality. I whispered softly. That's unfortunate. What? Nothing. Then I ended the call. No goodbye. No apology. No final argument. I simply disconnected. And for several seconds I stood there listening to the silence in my apartment. The company had finally done it. They removed the person carrying their internal infrastructure. And somehow thought everything would continue normally. My phone buzzed again. Text message. Unknown number. I opened it. It was from Maya, senior account strategist. One of the few colleagues I actually trusted. Lauren, please tell me Ethan didn't really fire you. I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. Nobody knows what's happening. Prescott is already escalating. Compliance team is panicking. Samantha just locked herself in conference room 3 crying. I slowly sat down at the kitchen counter. Interesting. Very interesting. I typed back. Yes. I'm officially terminated. 30 seconds passed. Then Maya answered. Oh my God. He just destroyed operations. I stared at that message longer than expected. Destroyed operations. Not damaged. Destroyed. Because Maya understood something leadership never did. Companies are systems. Complex moving systems built on people who quietly understand how everything connects. I happen to be one of those people. And Ethan had just removed me because I refused to work during vacation. I should have been scared. Instead, I felt strangely free. Then another notification appeared. LinkedIn message. Unknown sender. Name Victor Hale. Chief Executive Officer. Axis Core Industries. One of Northridge's largest direct competitors. I opened the message. Short. Simple. Professional. Lauren. I heard what happened this morning. Think we should talk. My heart skipped. I read the sentence twice. Then a second message arrived immediately. I followed your operational work for years. Call me when you're ready. I stared at the screen. Outside, rain tapped quietly against the windows. Inside, for the first time in years, I realized something. Maybe losing my job wasn't the disaster. Maybe it was the first honest thing my company had done for me in a very long time. And somehow, I had a feeling Ethan Reynolds was about to understand exactly how expensive his mistake really was. The strange thing about losing a job you've hated for years is that grief doesn't arrive immediately. You expect panic. You expect regret. You expect that sick, hollow feeling people describe when stability disappears overnight. But sitting there in my apartment, phone still warm in my hand, I felt none of that. Instead, I felt distance. Like someone had finally cut a wire that had been wrapped around my chest for years. For 7 years, my entire identity had quietly fused itself with work. Not intentionally. It happened slowly. First you stay late because the team needs help. Then management notices you're dependable. Then difficult clients start being routed directly to you. Then broken processes. Then emergency escalations. And eventually your job stops being a position. It becomes your entire nervous system. The dangerous part? Nobody notices because competence hides exhaustion beautifully. I sat at the kitchen counter staring at Victor Hale's LinkedIn message. I knew exactly who he was. Everyone in our industry knew Victor. CEO of Axis Core Industries. Aggressive growth strategy. Strong client retention. Reputation for rewarding internal leadership. Unlike Northridge. At Northridge, executives collected praise while operational teams quietly absorbed disaster after disaster. My phone vibrated again. Another message. Maya. Lauren. This is bad. I typed immediately. What happened? The typing bubble appeared instantly. Prescott canceled the 11 a.m. review. They're furious. Compliance documents were wrong. I stared at the screen. Impossible. I personally completed those files last Thursday. They had already been approved, which meant someone had touched the reporting package after I left. I typed again. Who modified the file version? Several seconds passed. Then, Trevor. I leaned back slowly. Of course. Trevor Collins. Regional Account Supervisor. Technically above Samantha. Technically qualified. In reality, a man promoted far beyond competence because he knew how to flatter executives. Trevor had one extraordinary talent. Turning confidence into camouflage. He rarely understood operational mechanics, but he spoke beautifully during leadership meetings. And people like Ethan loved employees who looked impressive, not employees who understood systems. Another message arrived. Maya again. Ethan says this is your fault. That made me laugh. Actually laugh. It wasn't nervous laughter. It was the absurd kind. The kind people make when reality becomes so ridiculous anger feels inefficient. I typed slowly. How exactly is this my fault? Her answer came immediately. He says you left before completing quarter-end transition properly. Interesting. Very interesting. I opened my laptop instinctively, then stopped. Technically, it was still company property. They would probably disable access soon. Still, curiosity won. I logged into internal systems and immediately understood the problem. They hadn't locked me out yet. Amateurs. The dashboard lit up instantly. 23 unread escalation notices. 6 delayed reporting pipelines. 3 internal override approvals. I clicked one automatically. Prescott Manufacturing. Someone had manually replaced compliance documentation. I opened the revision history. Editor. Trevor Collins. Timestamp. 8:14 a.m. Today. I stared at the screen. Trevor had overwritten completed regulatory reporting 3 hours after I was terminated. Then Prescott rejected the documents. And Ethan blamed me. Beautiful. Corporate accountability at its finest. I took screenshots. Not because I planned revenge. Because I hated dishonesty more than I hated bad management. My phone rang again. This time unknown number. Chicago area code. I answered. A calm male voice responded immediately. Lauren Mitchell? Yes. Victor Hale. My pulse shifted slightly. Professional instinct. I stood automatically, pacing toward the windows. Mr. Hale. Victor. His voice carried an unusual calmness. The kind of confidence people have when they don't need to prove authority. I hope I'm not interrupting. I looked around my silent apartment. No. I heard about your departure this morning. News travels fast in competitive industries. Especially executive mistakes. I said carefully. I imagine rumors travel quickly. He laughed softly. Actually. Pause. One of your former clients called us 40 minutes ago. That got my attention. What? Prescott Manufacturing. I stopped moving. Prescott. Already? Victor continued. They asked if AccessCore had someone capable of handling enterprise compliance transitions. I felt my heartbeat accelerate. Not fear. Recognition. Prescott trusted me personally. Not Northridge. Me. Victor's voice remained steady. I told them I know exactly who can handle enterprise operations. I stared silently at the skyline outside my apartment. Cars moved slowly through midday traffic. Somewhere inside a glass tower downtown, Ethan Reynolds was probably still convincing people he controlled the situation. He had no idea. Victor continued. I'd like to meet tomorrow. I swallowed carefully. About a job? No. Interesting answer. Then about what? His voice lowered slightly. About leadership. That sentence stayed with me. Not employment. Not recruitment. Leadership. A word Ethan used constantly but clearly misunderstood. I answered quietly. Tomorrow works. Excellent. He paused. Then added something unexpected. For what it's worth. Another pause. I've been watching your work for nearly 3 years. My chest tightened slightly. Victor continued. Most executives focus on revenue reports. Pause. I pay attention to who quietly makes those reports possible. I didn't know what to say. Because for 7 years, nobody had said something like that. Recognition feels strange when you spend too long being invisible. After the call ended, I stood silently for nearly a minute. Then Maya texted again. Emergency meeting happening now. Ethan is losing control. I smiled slightly. Good. Another message followed immediately. Trevor is blaming Samantha. Poor Samantha. 26 years old. New hire. Hardworking. Ambitious. And now being sacrificed to protect management. Nothing changes faster than corporate loyalty when executives panic. I typed. Tell Samantha not to sign anything. Maya answered instantly. Why? Because Ethan will need someone responsible. 5 seconds later. Oh, exactly. I closed the laptop and walked into the living room. Sunlight stretched across hardwood floors. The apartment felt larger somehow. Like stress had been taking physical space inside the walls. For years I had postponed everything. Trips. Relationships. Weekends. Family visits. My younger sister had stopped inviting me to birthday dinners because she already knew my answer. Sorry. Quarter-end reporting. Sorry. Client escalation. Sorry. Emergency review meeting. Somewhere along the way I convinced myself sacrifice meant success. But success without respect becomes slow self-destruction. I was only beginning to understand that now. That evening around 7 p.m., another notification appeared. Email. Personal account. Sender. Human resources. Subject. Separation process. I opened it. Standard legal language. Return company property. Termination acknowledgement. Confidentiality review. Non-compete restrictions. Typical corporate procedure. Then one line caught my attention. We request your cooperation in assisting temporary knowledge transfer for active enterprise accounts. I stared at the sentence. Remarkable. They fired me. Then immediately needed my help. Without me, operations were collapsing already. I almost admired the audacity. A minute later Maya called. This time I answered instantly. She didn't even say hello. Lauren. Her voice sounded exhausted. What happened? 3 clients escalated. I walked slowly toward the balcony doors. How bad? Very bad. She exhaled sharply. Prescott threatened contract suspension. I stayed quiet. She continued. North River Logistics delayed payment authorization. Pause. Summit Healthcare requested executive review. 3 enterprise accounts. All within 8 hours. That wasn't normal. That was operational breakdown. I asked quietly, "What's Ethan doing?" She laughed bitterly. Pretending everything is under control. Of course. Always. I could picture him perfectly. Standing in conference room 6. Perfect suit. Perfect posture. Pretending authority could solve structural incompetence. I asked, "What about Trevor?" He locked himself in finance. I almost smiled. Predictable. When incompetent people face accountability, they disappear faster than anyone. Maya suddenly lowered her voice. There's more. What? She hesitated. Then, Ethan told leadership you sabotaged transition before leaving. There it was. The official narrative. Blame the absent employee. Classic. I leaned against the balcony railing. The evening skyline glowed softly above Chicago. 7 years. Thousands of late nights. Hundreds of solved disasters. Millions in retained client revenue. And the moment I stopped being useful, they rewrote history. Something cold settled inside me. Not sadness. Perspective. Maybe I had stayed loyal to the wrong people for far too long. My phone vibrated again. Email notification. Victor Hale. I opened it. Short message. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Axis Corps headquarters. Bring nothing except honesty. I read the final sentence twice. Bring nothing except honesty. Simple words. But somehow, they felt heavier than everything Ethan had said to me in 7 years. Because respect sounds very different from control. That night I sat at the dining table with a notebook. Blank page. No work dashboards. No deadlines. No emergency client reports. Just silence. I stared at the page for nearly a minute, then finally wrote 5 words. I will never work afraid. For several seconds I studied the sentence. Something about seeing it physically written changed everything. For years I thought professional success meant endurance. Push harder. Work longer. Become indispensable. But being indispensable inside the wrong company only makes exploitation easier. Outside the apartment, traffic lights reflected softly against nearby windows. Somewhere downtown, Ethan Reynolds was watching systems collapse one client at a time. And tomorrow morning, I had a feeling my entire life was about to change. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was curious, and somehow curiosity felt a lot like freedom. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. Not because I had somewhere urgent to be. Not because overnight emails were waiting. Not because some executive had created another disaster I needed to solve before breakfast. For the first time in years, I woke up because I wanted to. That realization felt strangely unfamiliar. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror while brushing my hair, noticing something small but unsettling. I looked different. Not physically, but softer somehow. Less tense. For years I had carried stress so consistently that my body forgot what neutrality felt like. My shoulders were always tight. My jaw constantly clenched. Even sleep had become shallow, like part of my nervous system remained permanently on call. This morning, silence existed inside me, and I didn't know what to do with it. At 9:43 I arrived outside Axis Corps headquarters. 42-story glass tower overlooking the river. Minimalist architecture. Quiet lobby. No chaotic reception desk. No visibly exhausted employees rushing through revolving doors balancing coffee in panic. Interesting. Companies reveal culture before people say a word. I noticed things automatically. Old habits. A receptionist smiled naturally. Not forced. Security greeted employees by name. 2 analysts stood near the elevators casually discussing something without looking terrified. At Northridge, people moved differently. Fast. Guarded. Constant low-level tension. Pressure leaves fingerprints everywhere. A woman approached me near reception. Tall. Dark navy blazer. Confident posture. Early 40s. She extended her hand. Lauren Mitchell? Yes. I'm Rachel. Nice to meet you. She smiled warmly. Victor's finishing another meeting. I'll bring you upstairs. No unnecessary corporate performance. No exaggerated professionalism. Just normal conversation. I immediately noticed how unusual that felt. Inside the elevator, Rachel glanced toward me. Long morning. I smiled slightly. You could say that. She hesitated briefly, then asked carefully, You really handled the Prescott Enterprise migration alone? Interesting question. Mostly. She laughed softly. Victor talks about you constantly. That caught me off guard. What? She nodded. He's obsessed with operational architecture. Pause. He said you built one of the cleanest enterprise account systems in the industry. For several seconds I didn't answer, because I was trying to process something unfamiliar. Professional recognition. Real recognition. Not empty annual review compliments. Not manipulative executive praise before asking for unpaid overtime. Actual respect for competence. The elevator opened on floor 37. Rachel led me through a quiet executive hallway. Glass offices. Open workspaces. Natural light everywhere. No giant corner offices screaming hierarchy. Interesting again. Victor Hale stood waiting near a conference room. Mid-50s. Tall. Silver hair. Perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He looked exactly like someone used to making expensive decisions. But unlike Ethan, he wasn't performing authority. Authority already existed around him naturally. He shook my hand firmly. Lauren. Victor. He gestured inside. No assistants. No legal team. No HR representative. Just 2 coffee cups waiting on the table. I sat. Victor remained standing briefly, looking out over the skyline. Then turned toward me. I imagine yesterday was unpleasant. That made me smile. Understatement. He sat across from me, calmly, then asked something unexpected. Do you know why I contacted you? I thought for a second. Prescott. He shook his head. No. Interesting. I stayed quiet. Victor folded his hands. For 3 years my analysts have monitored operational performance across 6 major competitors. I listened carefully. He continued. Your company consistently retained enterprise clients above expected benchmarks. I nodded slowly. That was true. Our team investigated why. Pause. We discovered something unusual. He leaned slightly forward. One individual was solving nearly 80% of systemic operational failures. I stared at him. He said it casually, as if discussing weather. Not realizing those words hit harder than anything I had heard professionally in years. Victor continued. That individual was you. For 7 years I had worked invisible overtime, quietly fixing disasters, quietly preventing contract losses, quietly protecting revenue streams executives later claimed credit for. And somehow, a competitor had noticed before my own company ever did. That realization was painful in ways I wasn't prepared for. Victor watched me carefully, then smiled slightly. You look surprised. I am. You shouldn't be. I laughed softly. You're probably the only executive who ever noticed. No. He corrected me immediately. I'm probably the only executive who bothered checking. That sentence stayed with me, because deep down, I knew he was right. At Northridge, leadership never cared how systems functioned. Only whether numbers looked impressive enough for quarterly presentations. Victor reached for a folder, placed it on the table. I glanced down instinctively. Access Core Executive Offer. I frowned. Executive. He nodded. I'm offering you Chief Operational Strategy Officer. I looked back up, certain I misunderstood. That's. I stopped. Victor smiled. Yes. It was absurd. 3 days ago I was drowning under impossible deadlines. Yesterday I got fired over vacation. Today I was being offered an executive position. I stared silently. Victor leaned back calmly. Before you answer. He paused. I should tell you something else. His expression shifted slightly. More serious now. Your former company is collapsing. I blinked. What? He slid his tablet across the table. 3 industry reports. 2 client notices. Emergency contract review announcements. Prescott Manufacturing had officially suspended partnership negotiations. North River Logistics froze pending renewal. Summit Healthcare initiated legal review. All within 24 hours. I stared quietly. Victor studied me carefully. Surprised? No. And I meant that. Not surprised. Concerned maybe. But not surprised. Because systems behave predictably. Remove the person balancing critical operational pressure. Collapse begins fast. Victor folded his arms. Your former COO underestimated structural dependency. I nodded. He always thought pressure creates efficiency. Victor smiled faintly. That philosophy usually belongs to executives who've never built anything themselves. Exactly. Perfectly said. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then my phone vibrated. Maya. I excused myself and answered. She sounded breathless. Lauren. Something was wrong. What happened? Ethan wants to sue you. I almost laughed. Why? He says confidential internal knowledge caused client instability. Interesting. Very interesting. So now we had entered panic stage. I asked calmly, what exactly does he think I did? You existed. I smiled despite myself. Maya lowered her voice. There's more. I listened. 5 department heads just resigned. That made my stomach tighten slightly. 5? Already? She continued. Finance is frozen. Pause. HR locked conference rooms. Another pause. Anne. I could hear voices behind her, shouting somewhere. Then, the CEO just arrived. That mattered. Northridge CEO rarely appeared physically. If he came in person, the damage was catastrophic. I asked quietly, what about Ethan? Silence. Then Maya whispered. He looks terrified. Good. Very good. We ended the call. Victor watched me carefully. Bad. I exhaled slowly. Worse than expected. He nodded. No surprise on his face. Almost like he predicted exact timing. Then suddenly he asked, do you miss them? I frowned. My company? Yes. I thought carefully. 7 years. Thousands of late nights. Hundreds of solved emergencies. Colleagues I genuinely respected. Clients who trusted me personally. And leadership that treated competence like exploitation opportunity. Finally I answered. I miss the people. Victor smiled. Good answer. Then he pushed the contract toward me again. I looked down. Compensation package nearly double my previous salary. Equity options. Full executive authority. Autonomous department control. I should have signed immediately. But something stopped me. I looked back at Victor. Why me? He answered instantly. Because I don't hire resumes. Pause. I hire people who quietly carry impossible systems. Something shifted inside me hearing that. For years I believed hard work eventually guarantees recognition. But life isn't structured that cleanly. Sometimes recognition never comes. Sometimes the wrong people profit from your effort forever. And sometimes, the only reason your value becomes visible is because someone finally removes you. My phone vibrated again. Email notification. Sender. Ethan Reynolds. Interesting. Very interesting. I opened it. Subject. Urgent professional discussion. The message itself contained only one sentence. Lauren. We need to talk immediately. No signature. No formal structure. No executive arrogance. Not even punctuation. Panic changes writing style remarkably fast. I showed Victor the screen. He laughed quietly. Looks like someone finally discovered your value. I stared at Ethan's message. For years I had answered instantly. Fixed problems immediately. Protected his authority without receiving protection in return. But not today. I locked the phone screen. Set it face down on the table. Victor noticed. Not answering. I looked directly at him. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled without exhaustion behind it. No. Then I reached for the contract. Picked up the pen. And somewhere 30 blocks away, I had a feeling Ethan Reynolds was beginning to understand something very expensive. the employee you undervalue the longest, is often the person keeping everything alive. And once they leave, sometimes the entire machine dies with them. By the time I signed the contract, my phone had 23 unread notifications. Most of them from Northridge. That alone told me everything. For 7 years, if there was an emergency, people contacted me. Not because I was management. Not because my title demanded it. Because everyone knew one thing. If Lauren handled it, it got fixed. That kind of reputation takes years to build. And one reckless executive can destroy it in a single day. Victor watched me sign the final page. Then nodded once. Simple. No dramatic congratulations. No fake speeches. Just respect. I'd like you to start Monday. I blinked. Monday. He smiled. I assume you'll need a few days. That made me laugh. At Northridge, after 7 years of nonstop pressure, they fought me over 3 weeks of medical leave. At Axis Corps, after offering me an executive position, they gave me time to breathe without me even asking. Culture always reveals itself in the details. Victor stood. One more thing. I looked up. We're onboarding Prescott. That hit immediately. Already? He nodded. They specifically requested you. I leaned back. That meant something deeper than money. Clients had trusted me enough to follow. Not because of branding. Not because of contracts. Because of consistency. Real relationships built through work. Victor added quietly. That's rare. I knew. Very rare. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized Ethan had probably just lost one of the company's largest enterprise accounts because he fired the person managing trust. That kind of mistake doesn't stay hidden. I left Axis Corps around noon. For the first time in years, I walked through downtown without rushing. No calls. No deadlines. No fires. The city felt different. Louder. Sharper. More alive. Maybe it had always been like that. Maybe I had just been too buried in work to notice. By 2:30 p.m. my phone rang again. Maya. I answered. This time she didn't waste time. He's gone. I stopped walking. What? Ethan. I stood on the corner outside a coffee shop. Traffic moving around me. People crossing streets. Normal life continuing. And yet, that sentence felt enormous. Gone. Board suspended him. I stared ahead. Fast. Much faster than I expected. Maya continued. The CEO blamed him for client losses. Of course. Executives protect each other until money disappears. Then loyalty evaporates. What about Trevor? She laughed bitterly. Resigned. Predictable. He saw the walls collapsing and ran before they buried him. I asked, what happens now? Long pause. Then Maya answered softly. No one knows. That part hurt. Because beneath the politics, real people remained. People who still had jobs. People still inside broken systems. People like Samantha. Jason. Maya. Good workers caught in leadership failure. I asked, how's Samantha? She's okay. Pause. Still crying. That made my chest tighten. She shouldn't have been carrying blame. None of this was hers. That's how bad systems work. Leadership makes mistakes. Lower levels absorb trauma. Always. Maya's voice softened. Did you really leave? I smiled. Yes. Where? Axis Corps. Silence. Then, oh my God. I laughed. She exhaled. They won. Interesting choice of words. No, not one. Escape. There's a difference. That evening around 6 p.m., I received a formal email from Northridge Legal. Request for transition cooperation. Consulting terms. Temporary advisory compensation. I read it twice. Remarkable. Less than 48 hours after firing me, they wanted to pay me to repair what they broke. I almost admired the irony. Almost. Then another email arrived. This one from the CEO directly. Subject. Request for meeting. That surprised me. Northridge's CEO, Alan Bishop, had barely spoken to me in 7 years. I was too far below executive level. Invisible. Operational. Useful but not important. Until the structure collapsed. I agreed to meet. Not for loyalty. For closure. The next morning I walked back into Northridge for the first time since being terminated. Everything felt different. The lobby was tense. People moved slower. Conversations stopped when I passed. Not because they blamed me, because they knew. They understood now. The machine had depended on parts leadership never valued. Alan Bishop waited upstairs. Late 50s. Controlled. Sharp. The kind of man who looked expensive even sitting still. He gestured toward the chair. Lauren. I sat. No smile. No warmth. Straight business. He folded his hands. I'll be direct. Of course. We made a mistake. Interesting. Not Ethan made a mistake. We. Collective accountability only appears when damage spreads. I said nothing. He continued. We'd like to offer reinstatement. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was too late. After everything. After firing me. After blaming me. After trying to rewrite my work. Now. Reinstatement? Alan pushed a paper across the table. Double salary. Executive title. Retention bonus. Impressive. Months ago I would have thought it was life-changing. Now it looked like panic. I glanced at it briefly, then pushed it back. No. He frowned. You haven't heard the full offer. I heard enough. His expression hardened slightly. You built systems here. Yes. And you're walking away? I looked directly at him. This mattered. Because for the first time someone at the top needed to hear truth without filters. I built systems, I said quietly. Pause. You built pressure. He stayed silent. I continued. For years. Long pause. You rewarded survival instead of stability. His eyes narrowed. Not anger. Discomfort. Good. Truth should feel uncomfortable. I stood. Alan spoke quickly. Lauren. I paused. He looked at me carefully. Access Core won't protect you forever. I smiled. That sentence revealed everything. He still thought loyalty was fear-based. Transactional. Temporary. I answered simply. I'm not looking for protection. Then I walked out. That was the last time I entered Northridge. 3 months later, the company lost 4 more major clients. 2 departments merged. 37 layoffs. Massive restructuring. Industry confidence dropped. They survived. Barely. But they were never the same. At Access Core, things were different. Not easier. Real work is never easy. But cleaner. Structured. Intentional. My first month was exhausting. Rebuilding enterprise systems. Strengthening compliance architecture. Training team leads. Meeting clients. But for the first time in my career, people listened when I spoke. Not because they had to. Because my role finally matched my responsibility. That changes everything. Rachel became one of my closest colleagues. Sharp. Brilliant. No ego. Maya left Northridge 2 months later and joined my team. Samantha too. She turned out to be exceptional once someone actually trained her instead of sacrificing her. Funny how talent grows under good leadership. That's another thing companies forget. People don't fail in bad systems. Systems fail people. Tonight I'm sitting alone in my apartment again. Same kitchen. Same window. Same city lights outside. But everything feels different. My laptop is open. Tomorrow's planning schedule is ready. 3 major client reviews. 2 internal strategy meetings. 1 operational audit. A full day. But manageable. Healthy. Normal. I look at the clock. 10:14 p.m. 4 years at this hour, I was still fixing someone else's emergency. Tonight, I'm done. Work ends. Life begins. That distinction matters. I call my sister. For the first time in months. She answers immediately. Surprised. Laughing. And suddenly I realize how much life I gave away trying to keep broken systems alive. Never again. Outside, rain taps softly against the windows. Quiet. Steady. Familiar. Tomorrow morning I'll walk into Access Core not as the invisible woman carrying impossible weight, but as the person responsible for building something better. Not through pressure. Not through fear. Through structure. Through trust. Through respect. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. A company can survive bad leadership. Sometimes. But no company survives for long after teaching its best people that loyalty only matters when they're useful. Northridge learned that too late. I didn't. And for the first time in years, I finally understand something simple. Being needed is not the same as being valued. And once you learn the difference, you never settle for less again.